I'm going to start, and I'm going to say a few things, Andy. I hope you don't mind. So this is an unusual and challenging format, not just because we can't meet in person, but because we're going to try to do something that is very difficult to do in a group anyway, which is to go through a very long and dense document. I suspect that some of the people that are here have not gone through the document. Like I'm looking at Meredith, for instance, who probably didn't even know how to access it. But if you had emailed me, I would have told you how to access it. So if you have something in particular you want to say before, and you're muted right now, by the way. I don't know why, why you chose to come tonight, but I think what I want to say is this document is at a critical point. We kind of have one more shot at it. So we need to go through this document, or at least you need to tell me what your concerns are about it, what you like and don't like, what you would like me to convey to the consultant about changing it. And I think we have to spend at least a solid hour doing that. And then we might have a little time after that to do the other items on the agenda. We can meet again if we need to, but the logistics of this are a little bit more difficult than usual. So if we could get through it tonight, that would be great. We don't have to, though. We can meet again in a couple weeks. One of the things that about this new meeting protocol is that the town cannot host more than one meeting per night. So we can't meet on our regular night. I said this to most of you in an email, because it's the same night as school committee. So we'll have to find a night where there's no other meetings already scheduled. So that being said, what we had said, Andy and I and James, who is recording for us, thank you very much, James, for hosting the meeting, is that if you want to talk, to use the raise hand function. In most, it's either under participants or it's under more, depending if you have an Apple device or a Microsoft device or a whatever not Apple is called generically. And if anybody needs help to find that, say so now. Why doesn't everybody try to find it? But we want to try to not have a situation. If you've been on a Zoom meeting, you know that there's nothing worse than having two people talk at once, let alone 5 people talk at once. You just can't hear anybody. So Andy's going to try to chair. I'm going to try to help. James is going to be the host, and we're going to give it our best shot. Make sure you're not muted when you speak, which I hope everyone knows how to do that. There's a little picture of a microphone somewhere, and you just touch it or click on it and it will unmute you. Okay.
So I'm having slight technical difficulties here.
And then there's that.
There is. Well, my work computer is blocking me from starting the session on my work computer. And this is odd.
We can hear you fine.
Okay. Okay, so anyway, so Laura and I talked about how we could go through this whole process. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I want to show appreciation for Laura for getting us to this point. I think just in terms of logistics and coordination, I think this has been really kind of a real challenge to get us to this point. So that being said, we talked about how we could possibly get through this. And so the document itself, well, let me take a step back. I think a good plan typically has 3 parts. A good plan says, here's where we are. The second part is, where do we want to go? Where do we want to be? Kind of the vision. And the third part of a good plan is, how do we get there? And so I think all of those components are in this plan. There's actually 5 sections. There's an introduction, and that's just kind of, I'm not sure that, that needs to be discussed. The next section is really kind of the, where are we? Where is Watertown? The facts, the figures, what's Watertown all about? The third section is kind of what was the methodology that we used going forward? So I'm not quite sure that there's a lot of discussion to be had around those first two sections. It's really just kind of background. But I think the fourth section is really about the vision. It's where do we want to go? And then the last section, of course, is how do we get there? So for the most part, I think most of the discussion is probably should be more around the fourth and fifth sections. But Laura also thought it might be a good idea before we dive into the sections, just to sort of, if we want, just to sort of talk in general about how we feel in general about the plan before we move forward into a more detailed discussion. So, we could just kind of open up the floor to just, if people want to talk about the plan in general, around their expectations, whatnot, next steps, whatever. So, we can just kind of open things up. So I see Sheila.
I raised my hand.
You raised your hand.
Now I'm going to lower my hand. I'm trying to be a good example. So I have to say I was terribly impressed with the early sections of the whole plan. I thought it was really covered a whole lot of wonderful stuff, took into account wonderful things. I thought it was really well written. When we started to get down to the specifics of what to do, I thought it was a little too vague. That's my overall impression. So I'm definitely interested in talking about the fourth and fifth sections, because I think we need to figure out if I'm just being way too fussy about it, or if it really is just vague and we need a little more specificity. And maybe it's not supposed to be specific, but that was my take on it.
All right. Anybody else have Thomas? I see your hand up, Thomas.
Yes, thanks. I was also very impressed with the comprehensiveness of the data that were collected and its presentation. And I think what the document doesn't do as well as it might, and I think needs to be shaped by this committee, is to decide between two complementary but different objectives. One is safety, and the other is getting there, specifically to work and to destinations. Those complement one another, but they involve different strategies. For example, safety is an issue in Watertown Square and on Watertown Street, as was very clearly put out by the data that was provided. And then there's also the issue of trying to get to commercial destinations and to get to work, which I think also needs to be an important priority. So I think that it's incumbent on this group to try and parse those priorities and to choose amongst the different options for how we can get there.
So just trying to kind of line up with you. So how would that look in terms of the composition of the document itself? How would you see the?
Well, I think that it does a really amazing job of these 5 levels of stress. And as a bike commuter to work, I thought it was really, really, really well done. And so, level 1 or level 0 of riding along the bike path, level 5 riding along Mount Auburn Street, which I did this afternoon. I think these are things we need to really pay attention to and to see what we can do to mitigate the 5 to a 3 or a 2, and certainly not lose the stress level 1, which is part of our very important recreational component of cycling. And then, of course, the issues of safety, which are more at the very dangerous intersections at Watertown Square, Watertown Street, and at Coolidge.
Okay, all right. So I think right now, this could be discussion, or we could just be sort of capturing information from people. Laura's taking notes. So thanks, Tom. So Bob, you have your hand up?
Yeah. I also found it very comprehensive and a lot of really useful information. I think by and large, the recommendations are on point. What I think is missing, it may not be the responsibility of this committee or these consultants, but a plan to be effective really needs to designate who's responsible for which recommendation, so that when you go back and start to look at how we're doing against the plan, you know who is the person responsible for each aspect of it. Now, I don't know whether it's this committee or this goes to the town council and they have to do it, which probably will never happen. But that's my primary issue, that effective plans always designate who has responsibility for, and the timetable for each. Now, they've got the term, is this a short term, medium term, long term, which I think as long as we put some time, what does short term mean? 1 to 3 years, 1 to 5 years. That's a little long. Anyway, but then who's, what part of town government or who's responsible for each of these recommendations?
Okay. That's a good suggestion. Maria? Thanks, Bob.
Unmute yourself, Maria.
I'm sorry, it takes a few minutes to get there sometimes. Since we're talking about the beginning of the report, I too thought the beginning was really thoughtful and well done. There were one of the most interesting things that I thought was this whole issue of, I know we haven't talked about a lot of pedestrian issues, but about the sidewalks and the analysis of the sidewalks throughout town. There's a section in existing networks in which they talk about our sidewalks being good, fair, and poor. And then on the next page, there was a map in which it shows where our sidewalks are in what condition. One of the things that struck me as I looked at this is how many of our poor sidewalks were in West Watertown. Okay. So the question that I thought about is, as we think about maintenance and as we think about access and as we think about going forward in our process, how do we ensure equity and access throughout? Do we really want to have one part of town with poor sidewalks, poor bike paths, poor bike lanes? And how do we evaluate the impact of our current approach? And how do we bake that into the recommendations? Because a lot of the things that they were talking about is that in West Watertown, very few of our sidewalks meet, what was it they call ARA? Is it ARA? Yeah, ADA standards.
ADAs.
Okay. So do we want to have a plan? And in our plan, we set goals for what each portion of town needs to have in order to have an equity in terms of the work that we're doing. There's nothing like this in terms of sidewalks analysis as well done as on the cycling side of the house. I thought this was just graphic. But I think we do need to evaluate what we're doing and what we're recommending in terms of equity and in terms of impact across the town. Yeah, in terms of crashes, they were talking about bicycle crashes as well. And I thought, there's no emphasis here. We don't have a town-wide thought of how we reduce pedestrian and bicycle crashes. We really don't have that kind of analysis going on. Not that's visible, understood, and if it's not visible and understood to us, how could it be visible and understood to anybody else? This is our interest. This is why we're here. So that was my comment. Thank
Okay.
you.
Right, thanks, Maria. I don't see any more hands. I guess at this point we could parse through the document section by section. Does that sound reasonable, Laura?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right. I was hoping to get the document up on the screen, but I'm not able to get that going. So to be expected, right? Technology is great when it works. If people want to follow along, so we'll start. So of course, the first section is overview. I don't have any notes on the overview section. Maria, your hand is still up.
Lower your hand, Maria.
Thanks, Maria.
Let me go lower my hand. Don't mean to have it up.
Thanks,
Okay,
Maria.
there we go.
All right. So the next section is walking and biking in Watertown today. And just personally, I found I got a lot reading this section. I was really impressed with some of the information. And actually I have the wrong version of the document up. So are there any, does anybody have any comments on the second section? Amy, I see your hand up.
Yeah, this is kind of a minor comment, and I think it applies throughout the document, but I agree with what everyone says about the great information in this section. I thought that the map, I think it's on page 12, it had so much good information in there, and it was really hard to digest in the format that it's in. They tried to cram in a lot on this one map, and I think it could be, it might benefit by splitting it up either geographically or, a few different maps for a few different topics. A part of it was trying to read it on a screen, but I think that's how most people will be looking at this anyway. And I think that came up a few times later in the recommendations as well. So that was my only comment on that section.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. The map is kind of busy.
So that's 2-12. I'm looking for the page. 2-12. What page is it?
There's a map on
2-6.
What?
Yeah.
2-6.
2-6.
It's, I guess, page 12 of the PDF.
Okay. I can deal with it either way. I just didn't know what I was looking for. 2-6. Okay. Too much information on one slide. I will just note that.
So I'm going to indulge myself just with some observations here. These aren't criticisms. These are just kind of, as I was reading this, it kind of caught my eye. Most used corridors by line bike users: Charles River Path, Main Street.
Where are you, Andy? Can you help me by telling me exactly where you are in the document?
Oh no, I'm just reading highlights. This is not a criticism.
Oh, this is
just my, hey, I didn't know this kind of comment.
Okay, go ahead.
So Charles River, the line bike users: Charles River Path, Main Street, Mount Auburn Street, Arsenal Street. I was like, oh my God, all those line bike users were using Mount Auburn Street. They should get medals. And down, there was a little blurb here. I thought this was interesting. Walnut Street are key links in the Watertown Bike Network, reaching over 350 and almost 300 riders per day, respectively.
Huh.
I was very impressed with that. more the case for a formalized bike access through there. And to your point here, Maria, sidewalks are classified as good condition if a continuous bituminous or cement concrete surface is provided are visibly free of significant cracking or trip hazards. Although sidewalks classified as good may not meet ADA standards for width and cross slope. That's not a good, it's not a good fact. Anyway, so Bob, I think your hand was up next, and then I see Ethan. So Bob.
Okay, just a quick observation. I haven't, my note is on 2-13 or page 19 in the PDF. The bicycle crashes resulted in injury. I think the issue here is and being a biker, anybody that bikes knows this. There are a lot of crashes that don't go reported, where you fall off, you're not hurt, the bike isn't damaged, and you go on, but they are crashes nonetheless. And this doesn't pick that up, and I'm not sure it's possible because they aren't reported, but it sort of makes it seem that a much higher percentage of bicycle crashes result in injury than is actually released from the point of view of anybody that bikes at all. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I just thought I'd note it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm willing to bet the crashes are probably underreported. Ethan, I see your hand up. How you
You
doing?
want me to, I'm just wanted to ask Bob, should I just change the language to say reported pedestrian crashes or reported bicycle crashes? Would that do it for you, or do you want to know?
I'll let it do the trick. I mean, I don't think there's a way of knowing, because
Yeah, I
if I have one of those and I'm okay and they're okay, I don't report it. So there's no way of knowing. So just say reported.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, hi everyone. I just want to flag one issue on 2.2, that the paragraph that starts, one of the major findings from the Lime data is that 70% of Lime bike trips that started in Watertown ended in Watertown, and it illustrated a demand for short trips via bike. I do think there is a demand for short trips via bike, and I think that's good data, but I think part of the reason that the Lime trips started in Watertown and ended in Watertown is because we weren't allowed to take them anywhere else.
Good point. Well, you were allowed to take them to Newton.
Right.
You just weren't allowed to take them to Cambridge or Boston.
Right. So they really were, to the extent that that data, we rely on that data at all, I just don't think it's very much can be extrapolated from that, and wanted to flag that.
I want to agree completely. I thought that was a real deficiency.
All right, Bob, I see your hand up. Hopefully that was that from last time, or?
No, that's
Okay,
I found another note.
good.
Just mentioning that major north-south corridors, I think Common Street rates is that, although it's a tough hill.
Oof.
A lot of people do, including myself because I live on it, use it. So I don't know whether that makes a difference or not, but it is an important way of getting north-south for those of us who are in shape.
I just want to say, I'm going back to, I think it was Ethan's point. Even though I think the 70% number isn't really that impressive if you consider that you can't go to Cambridge or Boston, but it does show demand for short trips, because that's mostly what it was used for. Ethan, was it Ethan?
Oh,
Who said
all right.
that?
Okay? I guess I thought, I guess it seemed to be making the point that, gosh, since there are these beginning and ending in Watertown trips on Lime bike, that shows a demand for short trips. And I think there is a demand for short trips, but I don't think that data says that. I think that data is attributable just as much to the fact that you couldn't take a Lime bike anywhere else.
If I may add, it's a useful enumerator, but there's no denominator. And I think it's important to know how many people are actually commuting, how many people are going to Cambridge, to Arlington, to Newton. Well, I guess Newton would be included, but I think it's a misleading statistic.
Yeah, it's the 70% that's misleading, right?
I think that needs to be pointed out.
Okay, I'll just make a little note and I'll deal with it tomorrow.
All right. I can't tell who had their hand up first. So Susan, I don't think you've spoken yet. Susan?
Unmute yourself, Susan. Susan, at the bottom of the screen at the bottom.
Oh, there, okay. I think a lot of people just tried out the line banks and took a little joyride around Watertown. So I don't think that the 70% is really terribly meaningful.
I can't find Susan now. Okay.
Right. Maria?
Vinny.
Huh? What?
I just noticed that Vinny's here.
Oh,
I think that really the important section here, the important section is the fact that the number of people who work and live in Watertown is so high. You know, that 19% of residents who work in Watertown, you know, and the number of percent of workers who live in Watertown is 18%. So that's our really the strongest point for those short trips. People who live here are working here, and therefore their commute's fairly short. It's within 4 miles. So that makes both walking and cycling much more accessible than you would find in some of the other communities around here. That, when you think about it, Laura, that's the real selling point.
Uh-huh. I agree. And that's because we have both places to work and places to live. Unlike
Correct.
community Arlington, where there's no place to work or very limited.
Right.
all right. Thanks, Maria.
Come on the
So any more comments on the second section? All right. Give me a chance to scroll here. It's a big document. All right. Third section, public engagement. I think this is more about the methodology and the process. I didn't have a lot of highlights on this. Maria, you have your hand up.
Sorry about that. I meant to say that one of the things I wanted to see more, and it's probably in the later sections, is when we're talking, for example, about the sidewalks that are good or poor. I thought in the later sections, because they do such a great job of lining that up. But in the later sections, they're really not talking about what we need to do to bring those up to really excellent, almost stuff that meets the ADA requirements, that is concrete, that doesn't have problems, that people can navigate from one side of town to the other. So I thought that was just so good, and yet we'll talk about it more when we get to the later sections. I did not see anything that really builds that strongly.
Mhm.
That's an interesting point. That's something that came up that I would love to hear your input on. So Matt talked about the fact that we have this policy that our sidewalks have to be concrete, but concrete is way more expensive than bituminous. So sometimes we're making a choice to do a smaller section in concrete rather than more sidewalk in bituminous. And sometimes you can do bituminous kind of quickly to deal with an emergency, you know, a sidewalk that's become very broken up because of a tree root or something like that. But concrete is a much more involved process and you can't respond to in quite as quickly with it. So he was saying that policy can sometimes get in the way of improving sidewalks. And I would love to hear what people's thoughts are about that trade-off.
There's actually they they actually list that as an issue later
Right,
on.
that was brought up by Matt. I mean, that's because Matt brought that up during the steering committee discussion that we had. And I just, like, that's an opportunity for you guys to say, yeah, concrete is really important, or maybe it doesn't have to always be concrete, or I would like to hear what your thoughts are about that.
Do you want that now or later when we get down to that section?
I don't know, we're talking about it now, so might as well. I can translate it into the other section.
Well, I can start that discussion if you like. I think that there's a really good point to be made on both. Both having concrete being the primary focus and bituminous when we have to solve an immediate problem. The one thing to keep in mind is the relative cost of fixing a street to fixing a sidewalk, and how much less expensive it is to fix a sidewalk than it is to fix a street.
Not if you're using concrete.
Well, when you're fixing the, well, we don't build concrete. You're right. We don't build concrete streets. But the problem, there's some downsides to both. And the downside that I see with the bituminous is that there's no real edge to the street. Right. So yesterday, where was I walking? I was walking around my neighborhood and somebody had parked their car up onto the sidewalk because it was bituminous and there was no edge, so they could literally, roll their wheel up and park. So if there's a way that we can discourage, either through enforcement or construction design, people parking on the sidewalk because it's bituminous, I don't have a problem with fixing an immediate problem, as long as his long-term goal is to replace and maintain all our sidewalks in town and convert them over to concrete over time. But there has to be a plan and an approach. And we have to figure out how we deal with people parking on the sidewalk. Because the way this guy was parked, I could barely get by, and forget anybody who has any disability issues. They would have never been able to get by. And it's very common.
Mhm.
Right. Thanks, Maria. Sheila, your hands up.
I have no problem with bituminous. I mean, concrete is nice. It's very flat, until it isn't, until it starts breaking up. My issue is the same thing as Maria's, which is there needs to be some designation of where the sidewalk ends, so to speak, so that cars don't feel safe parking on it. I think that's the major issue for me. To me, it's like, I would rather see a better sidewalk that's functional for ADA compliance and for people who are elderly to get around than to wait for a concrete sidewalk. I just want to make sure that the sidewalk is clear.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Bob?
Yeah, my observation of the bituminous is that it generally is not a very good surface. It breaks up, it gets uneven very quickly. I understand as a temporary fix, but even as a temporary fix, it's not very adequate, at least by my observation.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. I'm just curious though.
Janet has her hand up.
Who does?
Janet. Jameson.
How come you can see that and I can't see that?
I don't see her.
There's, oh, that hand. Yes.
Oh. I don't have her on my screen. She's scrolled to the right. Janet, one thing before you speak, on your screen, there's a raise hand button. And if you use that way I can see you, because I can't see you on the screen right now.
A raised hand. Can anybody else see me?
I can see you.
You can't?
Well, no,
I can.
what I'm saying is
Well,
there's so many people that I can only see six
Okay,
screens at a time, and you weren't one of those screens at the time.
okay, is it up? Where is it that I should?
Janet, let me
Just-
talk you through it. Go to participants at the bottom of your screen. Click on
Yeah.
that. And then that'll pop up on your right.
Right,
In that column of participants, down in the lower right-hand corner, there's a button that says raise hand.
I should use that.
You just,
Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Bob,
Okay.
that was excellent, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to say that I have a thing about sidewalks, okay? And I like concrete sidewalks. I think the others are very unattractive. And what they used to do, the town, is if you had a crack in your sidewalk, they would come and they would fix just that square. But the problem would be that at the end of the square, there would be a bump. So it would be like, why did you fix the sidewalk when there's a problem, you know, over that? And I thought the city made a recommendation that they were going to redo the sidewalks with the grass strips, and they were going to be in concrete. And even the bituminous ones were going to be changed. Isn't that true? Does anybody remember that? And I just think it's much nicer for walking and it looks better. So I think it's good to put the concrete. I don't like the others. And it does discourage people from parking on the strips. I mean, I live near a church, so people are parking on our street all the time, and they'll come right up over the sidewalk. Anyway.
okay.
And I noticed it in the report, and I thought this is a good time to stress that we need to redo our sidewalks when we do the streets, and we need to do them all.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, that also raises the whole question of curbs, of course, because it's curbs that really prevent people from driving up. I see people pulling over the grass strips onto concrete
That's my
sidewalks
street.
as well.
Yeah.
All right, so thanks, Bob. So Maria, I don't know if your hand is still up from last time or if you,
No, I forgot to lower it.
Okay.
Sorry.
all right, so I just have a question about the bituminous. So it sounds like people would be okay with bituminous if there was a way from preventing cars from driving up onto it, but what would that look like? Is there a solution there?
You guys don't have to do that. That you don't have to figure out the solution. I'll just convey that concern about bituminous. And then the engineers can figure that out. I
Okay.
think we're good. I think I've gotten good input. Thank you.
Well, Vinny's got his hand up. Vinny, welcome.
Hello, everyone. I don't have a copy of the report because it's not linked to the agenda, but just going back to the sidewalk, we did back in 2010, after a very long, complicated process, we did pass a curb and sidewalk ordinance that requires when all new streets are being repaved, that we redo the sidewalks. If necessary, sidewalks are required to be concrete. We are requiring grass planting strip, and we're requiring granite curbs. So that is a matter of law now. I would just caution recommending undoing that because it was a 2-year battle to do that. Those of you who remember, Deborah and Janet and Susan Falkoff and I really worked on that a long time, 2 years. So, and Mass DOT requirements in terms of rebuilding new roads, require concrete sidewalks. So,
Thanks, Vinny.
that being said, temporarily patching can be done with asphalt, but permanent repairs must be done with concrete.
All right, thanks, Vinny. Maria, you have your hand up again?
I'm sorry, I was just going to agree with Vinny. I don't think any of us are suggesting that we undo that. That was the right decision then. It's the right decision now. We're looking at what can we do to temporarily fix something so that it's accessible and useful for people to walk on. Not in any way replace that ordinance.
Okay. All right. I think, so any more questions on the public engagement section of the plan? As I said, I didn't really have any highlights on that. So we can move on to the next section, issues and opportunities to shape community vision and goals. Sheila, did you have your hand up? It disappeared.
Yeah, I did, and then you moved on, but I just want to point out that on page 29 of the document, they list some very clear things about what people wanted. So on the right-hand side, section 3.3, and it talks about the 3 top things that respondents would like things to do to encourage walking and biking, to improve maintenance of streets and sidewalks, to improve snow removal, and to construct more and safer on-street bike lanes. So I thought there were some nice little highlights there of what people really wanted that could guide what we focus on in terms of the next steps.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Sheila. Hey, Laura.
Yes.
I do have a comment on, so, sorry, sorry, I got lost in the document. All right, so public engagement. I did, on page 3.3, there's a diagram, priority locations, and about halfway down on the right, it says connection between Summer Street and Arsenal Street.
3.3.
Yeah. Is that correct?
You're under priority locations.
Yeah,
Square.
it says connection between Summer Street and Arsenal Street. Is there a connection?
Summer Street and Arsenal Street. Maybe they're saying they want a connection between Summer Street and Arsenal Street.
Okay. All right. All right. That would make sense. All right. So we're on section 3. I'm sorry, section 4. I'm getting lost. Sorry, section 4, issues and opportunities. Comments on that?
No comments.
So the only general comment I could make is on the map on 4.3, figure 16, pedestrian issues and opportunities identified by steering committee and bicycle pedestrian committee. It's you know, a lot of the issues and opportunities, you know, they're kind of high level. You know, I was thinking that detail would have been a little more tactical, would have been nice. You know, it's improved sidewalks for accessibility, especially. So, you know, that's true. You know, I think more specifics around that would be a lot more actionable. I think that's kind of one way I'm hoping this plan works, is that a lot of elements in the plan are actionable, so that when the time comes, we can actually approach people and say, can we put this plan in action? So, you know, these are suggestions and recommendations, but, you know.
No, they're issues and opportunities. They're not recommendations. That's the next chapter, is recommendations.
All right. Okay.
They're still identifying problems, really.
Okay. All right. I wasn't keeping track here. Amy, your hand's up.
Yeah, I have a comment in this section on, I guess it's page 4-10, where it talks about Vision Zero. I think it's great that the plan, talks about this topic and talks about the importance of safety. The sentence that I had an issue with talked about designating Vision Zero areas within Watertown, and I wanted that to be a little bit stronger and talk about, Vision Zero. I know this isn't the goal section, but talking about, Vision Zero as a goal, or taking a Vision Zero approach throughout town to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. I think, we shouldn't sort of hold back if we want this plan to be sort of aspirational and something to strive towards. So that was my comment on that section.
That it should be the whole town. Should have, if we're gonna have a goal, if people don't know what Vision Zero is, it's a policy or a philosophy that we should strive to have 0 fatalities and serious accidents on our streets. And that it usually includes a series of changes, including lowering the speed limits. It's actually pretty speed oriented. Traffic calming, things along those lines.
Yeah, and I think the other aspects of the plan, support that goal, that we should, if they're going to include it, just sort of to state that as a goal, I think would be good.
Got it.
Thanks, Amy. Sheila?
Myself. I found the maps on 4.3 and especially 4.4 a little confusing to try and follow, because for example, on the opportunities, it says improve connection to schools as number 2. There's no blue number 2. There's a yellow number 2, but there's issues down below of the issues are listed in yellow. And number 2 is inadequate regional connections, which I think is actually the number 2 that's the big arrow. So I think that map needs some correction, because I was looking at it and going, I'm not following what's going on here. I had a few similar problems with 4.3 map on page 32. It was a little better about the opportunities being numbered correctly and the issues being numbered correctly, but there's some of them are also a little off.
Okay.
That's a good point. Maria?
On page 4.9, there were 2 things that I thought were really interesting and we need to address. And maybe Laura, they can change this. Is in that first paragraph where it starts the connectivity issue. If you look at the last sentence, it talks about there's no dedicated funding mechanism to allow for sidewalks other than part of the full roadway reconstruction. I thought that was really another really important point that we needed to have later in the recommendation section, that we find a funding source for fixing sidewalks that are not tied to the streets. So that just made a lot of sense, but there was no follow-up to this.
If there's no about funding sources, I think there might be,
but nothing that says we need a dedicated funding source for sidewalks. Everything is tied to the streets. And I think we need to decouple the streets and the sidewalks in terms of funding. When we're doing, let's say that we're doing the street reconstruction, yes, let's go ahead and do the sidewalks. But we need to have a clear dedicated funding for doing sidewalks by themselves, because they serve different purposes than the streets. And then in the next sentence, in the middle of that paragraph, there was this odd sentence that says there is also a cost associated with enforcement when resources may be better spent on other safety issues during snow events. I'm not sure exactly what they meant, but I found that a rather odd comment
That's on the same page
on the same page.
at the bottom, no, middle.
In the middle, yeah.
Tell me where again?
In the middle of the paragraph.
Okay. The town
Okay.
has a snow and ice removal ordinance, is that it?
In the next sentence, there's also a cost associated with the enforcement when resources may be better spent on other safety issues during the snow event.
Yeah, I actually did a little work on that paragraph too, because she's conflating, I think, the DPW and the zoning enforcement there.
And I think that there's nothing wrong with enforcement having a cost. I mean, that just, if we're concerned about the cost of enforcement, then we need to look at it more broadly. It has nothing to do with safety issues during a snow event.
Yeah.
It's just an odd sentence.
Yeah, I got it. I had taken that out too in my comments.
Okay, thank
And-
you.
And I'm not surprised to see Bob's hand up. I think this is a good segue, Bob. Bob, you're mute. You're on mute, Bob, I think.
First of all, I picked up the same things that Maria did. I think the line item, a separate line item for sidewalks is absolutely necessary. Yeah, I was perplexed by the enforcement language as well. And going back up to 4.3, I think we need to call out improved sidewalks, particularly from areas of senior housing, both in the West End, Waverly and Warren Street to Watertown Square, and the East End to Coolidge Square. Both, I think, need to be called out. Older residents really rely on walking those routes. So I don't think it's called out anywhere in here, and I just like to see that in.
Okay.
Thanks, Bob. Vinny.
Yeah, I just want to point out, if you look in the budget, there's two sections to it. There's a street and sidewalk reconstruction with bonding, which is $2.5 million a year. But there's also a line item for sidewalk repair. It's and also a separate line item for street repair, which are not part of construction project. The sidewalk repair line for this year, fiscal year 20, is $530,600. So there's currently a separate line item for just sidewalk repair, which we hire a separate contractor to do just sort of spot repairs around town on specific sidewalks. So so we are currently already doing that.
All right, thanks, Vinny. Janet, I see a hand up for you. Is that from last time or? You're probably on, yeah, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I didn't have my hand up.
Okay.
He doesn't know how to lower.
All right, so no more hands up. Any more discussion on the fourth section, issues and opportunities?
Oh yeah, one more. Mhm.
Sheila?
I want to point out there's one thing in here, and I did not see it as an action item in section 5, which in the snow and vegetation maintenance, before the piece that Maria was commenting on, it says publishing a snow clearance schedule to inform residents of which routes receive prioritized snow clearance may help aid in communication. I thought it would also be helpful to add to that, like that ought to be an action item, and it also ought to include what sidewalks are being prioritized, because I didn't see that as an action item in section 5. I just thought that was really helpful.
Okay, I got it.
Thanks, Sheila. Bob?
One other thing, 4.9, it's talking about regardless of legal speed, people may feel vehicles are speeding due to character condition of the roadway, et cetera. And just the observation that with the advent of use of GPS to avoid traffic lights and holdups, there's a lot of traffic going through neighborhoods that has never gone through before, which affects both pedestrians and cyclists who use the same routes. I'm particularly sensitive, of course, to the Bellevue cutoff that off of Common Street that enables people to get to Mount Auburn going into Cambridge by cutting through the neighborhood. But I know there are others, and I think that needs to be recognized, and traffic calming devices be put into those routes that are now much more heavily used than they used to be.
All right, thank you, Bob. Any more comments on issues and opportunities? I don't see any, so.
Whoops, I wanted to raise my hand.
Susan?
Yeah, I have to unmute my, okay. So something that some older residents pointed out was related to sidewalk impediments are tree branches hanging over, as well as roots through the sidewalk, buckling the sidewalks. So the need for coordination between those who take care of the trees and those who take care of the trees, maintain the trees, deal with hanging branches and other impediments caused by the obstructions of the sidewalks caused by trees. So I didn't see anything about that in the plan, but that does require coordination between the appropriate town departments.
It's mentioned under snow and vegetation maintenance right at the beginning, but just very, just a light mention, and no, it's the rest of the paragraph is about snow. It says routine maintenance in terms of snow clearance and tree trimming for bicycle and pedestrian areas are concerns when considering a bicycle and pedestrian network. Well, I'll write that down and see if there's someplace I can beef that up a little bit.
Yeah, I missed it there, but so thank you.
Yeah, tree trimming. I want to go back to what Bob Shea said, because I actually do not know where. What was your comment, Bob, about which section? Bob Shea?
Oh, you're on mute, Bob.
I'm mute. 4.9 to 4.10. I guess it's on the top of 4.10.
Okay, and it was about, what was it about? Was it about
advent of GPS causing traffic going through residential neighborhoods to avoid streetlights and traffic holdups? And I mentioned what I'm particularly aware of is the cutoff from Common Street across Bellevue down to Barnard or Bailey to avoid a couple of stoplights, et cetera. But I know this is happening in other parts of Watertown as well. And I think that needs to be tracked, and traffic calming devices be put into some of those to discourage at least the speed which those people are moving through there.
okay, got it now.
Okay, thanks.
I didn't know where you were.
Laura, our street's the same way. We're a cut-through street
And
for Waverly.
Andy, can
Yeah.
you hear me?
I can, Janet.
Oh, okay. I
What-
just want to add to that because I live in Windsor. School Street is parallel and they go racing through Windsor. I think they do that all over Watertown, go through what you're talking about, Bob, that we each have places where we can remember that. And I'm just very excited that they mentioned the 20 miles an hour. I think that I really appreciate that paragraph. And also a mention of the schools where they say that they'll be renovated in the next 5 years. They're starting the renovation this summer. So I think, maybe we do need to spend some more time on the schools.
Okay.
All right. Issues and opportunities, any, no more hands. So we move on to recommendations, the last section.
Should we have a little time check here? But since it's 8:30 something.
Okay,
Um,
what does that mean?
I guess we should just think about, I just want to acknowledge that the meeting's supposed to end at 9 and there's just a few other things on the agenda. So do you want to start and do a little bit? Like
Okay,
15 minutes or so?
I thought this was the only thing on the agenda.
Well, oh, Andy, we talked about the agenda.
Why don't we?
I'll tell you what else is on the agenda so we can decide.
Well, my idea was that we could walk through this process and at the end of the meeting, decide on the logistics of the next meeting, because I know Amy brought something up that I think is well worth discussing. I think at some point I need to engage the members on the collaborative letter with Watertown for climate change. So, I think for at least those two reasons, at the end of this meeting, we should talk about when do we engage next. So I would like to square off a little time for that. But other than that.
All right, what do we say? We'll go till 9:15?
Okay. All right. Because what we talked about that too is that we weren't sure if we were going to wrap everything up tonight, right?
Right, we did.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're on to recommendations. I'm sure people have a lot of ideas around this. So what did people think about the recommendations? So this section's broken up, the way I see it, recommendations are broken up into two categories. One category is what I would refer to as the hard category. It's the infrastructure. And the other category is what I would call the soft recommendations, more policy and education and that kind of a thing. I thought that the hard recommendations were rather more robust than the soft recommendations. A lot of the stuff that was recommended are things that we're already doing or that had already been planned. Some of it was very actionable. Some of it was somewhat vague. That's just my general interpretation. No comments on the recommendations? So we haven't heard from Deborah yet. Deborah?
Hi. So I just felt when I got to the recommendations that it felt like things had gotten dulled down and weakened and the points were more obscure. And I kind of agree with what somebody else said. For instance, there was a speed reduction in Vision Zero. I think there should be a robust recommendation that the town pursue that, because in terms of safety, it is the #1 thing you can do. As a bicyclist, I feel so much safer with cars going 20 miles an hour than 30 miles an hour. You can build all the infrastructure you want. So I'm just really disappointed to see, there was a really good documentation earlier, disappointed to see how watered down that was in the final recommendations. Also, I was disappointed to not see a recommendation for residential snow clearing on the sidewalks. There was no how every other town has it. But there was not like a really robust, sort of coming down in favor of that. It was like, oh, explore it or use these documents to help you figure out what to do. So it just didn't seem like it was a robust kind of embracing of those implementations. And then I was kind of disappointed in the toolbox that they offered. I think Mount Auburn Street to say, to say that Watertown Square is going to be studied and they'll come up with a solution. Watertown Square has been studied so many times. You're going to have to do something outside the box to solve the Watertown Square issues. There are models out there that I think we should be looking at. And so I was disappointed to see that they weren't offering any toolboxes or models outside of all the sort of standard ones that we've seen.
All right, thanks, Deborah. Jesse, your hands up.
Yes, thanks. I thought that the recommendations touched a lot on infrastructure and policy, as you mentioned before, but only very briefly on education. I know it, and throughout the plan, there are a few spots where it does try to bring up education either through the schools or working with the police department and stuff, but it really didn't go any further than just to mention that education is needed. It does mention a culture change is something that we brought up in our meetings last year, but I kind of wish it had made a little bit more of a proposal as to how education can happen, whether it's through some of the events that we're already doing or some new events, or you know, that's all. That's the only thing that really jumped out at me that was truly absent in the recommendations area, as far as like pillars of success that we might see, because
And Jesse, can you be more specific? What kind of recommendation, what kind of education are you referring to when you say that?
Well, just there are a few spots where it mentions education with like within the schools or working, I think it said with the police department or something like that, but it really didn't go into, there weren't really any solutions or concrete recommendations like it does have for infrastructure, like
Well, are you talking about education of school children? Or are you talking about education of bikers or drivers of the rules of the road, or what kind, who are you talking about educating?
I think all of the above. You know, where it mentions education, that's basically all it says is there should be education, but then it stops there. It doesn't list, it doesn't have anything further, you know? And so it's hard to articulate that because it's not there, in my opinion. Let me try and find an example here. Here it is. Let me see. So on page 520, page 61 of 63, under activity nodes, it says work with Watertown Police Department traffic safety officer to create pedestrian and bicycle awareness and educational programs, including education for drivers, to emphasize the importance of sharing the roadway. And then further down says safety programs can incorporate schools where they are tied to walk or bike to school days. But that's kind of it. It just stops at saying there should be educational programs and safety programs. And I was just hoping for a little bit more detail in that. You know, maybe there isn't. Maybe that's really, they felt that that was up to us to come up with, and that's fine. But you know, I just thought there could be just a little bit more there.
Got it.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. Trisha, we haven't heard from you yet. How you doing? And you're muted.
Yes, I'm doing well. I wanted to build on what Jesse was saying actually about the value of education and how it is thinly covered in this document, in the plan. But I think that that's a mantle that the Bike Ped Committee can take up and should take up, is educating both motorists as well as pedestrians and cyclists about sharing the road, safe modes of transit. And so I can see where the plan itself kind of falls short in laying out like who should be educated and how should they be educated on what and when, where, and how. But I think that that's something as a committee that we can fill in the gaps of.
In the plan or after
No,
the plan?
Just after the plan. I think the plan could maybe reference additional resources like the bike ped committee, but I think that that's something that we as a committee can focus on filling in after the fact.
Okay. Yeah, no, both you and I will, yes, I agree with you, but what I also agree with Jesse, and I'll try to see where it can be beefed up a little.
All right, thanks, Tricia. So Bob, I think you've had your hand up for a while.
Seems I always have my hand up. No. Just on 518, number 16, the recommendation about snow clearance for bike lanes and sidewalk facilities. A couple of things. I think our ad hoc committee on sidewalk snow removal, which is in suspension right now due to the pandemic, but I think we would like to see this moved up to a short-term thing to deal with, and it should be a high priority. And I think a bit more than the second half of the last sentence in that number 16, and expanding snow removal requirements to residential property owners to maintain sidewalk accessibility in winter months is one possible option that we're exploring, but there are others. So I think this section should be given a higher priority, and a shorter term, and probably the language strengthened it a little bit.
All right, thanks, Bob. Sheila, you have your hand up?
No, I do. Janet?
Okay, Janet.
I just wonder, I think these points that people have made are very important, and I think everything is in the recommendations. Is it worth it for us to go over this, sort of each one, and not change the ones that we think are okay, but put some teeth in the ones that we think are important? Or is that too much time?
So, sorry, Janet, I want to make sure I line up with you. Are you suggesting that we walk through the recommendations one by one?
Yeah.
I think there's what, 124 of them?
Well, I mean, some of them we can skip, but I just wondered if, the comments have been that this isn't strong enough.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if it's worth it for us.
That was most of my comments, whether they were too general or not. So what do people think about that approach? We wouldn't be, if we took that approach, that would happen tonight.
That would happen tonight?
Would not. Yeah,
would not. Yeah,
quarter
I
to
agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't have the.
It was just a thought. I just wondered.
Yep. No, there's no set way to do this.
Can I make one suggestion?
Yeah.
It strikes me that will take up a huge amount of time if we all try to go through each one of them, that it might be really good. And I don't know how we can do this, Laura, which is to write down our ones that we really feel need some more work on and send them to somebody to collate them.
Yeah, well, you could collate them, or we could say that people can get me comments until, I don't know, next Wednesday, whatever that is, May
So
27th.
So Sheila, what you're saying is that after this meeting, we go back individually and write up critiques of whatever recommendations that we feel are too general and send them to Laura? And that would be the end of the review?
I don't know if it'd be the end of the review, but I'm afraid if we try to go through every single one of them, it will be a time suck.
So we're not going to be able to, so Laura,
Mhm.
want to work with you on this. So it does, so right now it doesn't look like we're going to wrap up tonight.
Right.
So it looks like maybe we could, I know it's a lot of work for you, but maybe we could have a follow-up in a couple of weeks if we're fortunate.
Mhm.
And in between now and then, people's homework would be specifically to focus on recommendations and to select those that they're concerned with and write specific comments so that at the subsequent meeting, we can talk specifically about specific recommendations and walk through the problematic ones, not all of them, but the ones that people feel are problematic. And then we could walk through those and then we could complete a review. Is that a viable approach?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, we could have one more meeting and then, and I also will be happy to take comments in writing.
Oh, absolutely.
3 nights for meetings. Okay, I have written down the nights that are free.
Because Sheila, that's a very good comment. That's what I did is recommendation by recommendation. I categorized it as too general or very good or whatever, and then I had certain comments. So that would be my approach.
I get something from people's ideas or thoughts or pointing something out. That's just, I was saying, I know we can't do every one, and some of them are quite good. It's just that it's helpful for me to hear someone mention the education, and then it makes me think about that. You know,
I agree with you, Janet, and that's.
but that may be too time consuming. You're right.
No, just the problematic ones. Your approach makes sense for just, you know, for the ones that people are concerned with.
Mhm.
All right. I see some hands still up. I can't tell if they were up from last time or if people are waiting to talk. Deborah, your hand's been up for a while. Nope, it's gone. Maria, your hand's been up for a while and Amy's is up. So I'm going to go to Maria and then Amy.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. I thought overall these recommendations were better than the draft that we saw a while back. They're certainly better thought through and better targeted. One of the things that I thought they missed an opportunity to do is that they have the pages where we have, for example, all the things, all the toolboxes. One of the things I don't see is within all of these recommendations, I don't see any example of proof of concepts or things that we could do, low hanging fruit. I think we need to have a section that has a way for us to think about maybe having some proofs of concepts, certain things that we should be trying to do or trying out. They don't have to be expensive. They don't have to be extensive, but some ways of trying out things that they're thinking might be helpful with all the work that they've done in the town. What are some things that we can try out and do? Then the other thing that struck me is that it wasn't clear to me what they meant in terms of cost by a single dollar sign or $2 signs or $3 signs. There was no range, no way of evaluating that. Or long-term, medium term. Are we thinking medium term is 5 years, 3 years? Short term is next month? There was just no way of looking at that. One of the things was that they didn't consider things that you could do in phases. For example, as you look at their recommendations, sometimes they would put them as short term or medium terms or even long term, but there are things that we might be able to do even as a POC or as a phased approach. how do we take some of these larger things and break them out into more achievable projects or concepts that we can move forward with? You know, all of us know that the town is moving into a couple of years where we're going to be constrained financially because of this pandemic. So I think we need to have some projects that we might be able to do that it might be less expensive over the next several years while we're putting in place over, the longer term projects that we need to do, or tying them to work that's going to happen anyway. So somehow we have to marry these recommendations with the work that's already planned or thinking about for the next several years in the town, and at the same time having shovel ready, so to speak, projects that we can move forward with fairly quickly and easily over that period of time. Makes
Yeah.
sense?
Spoken like an IT person. All right.
I guess all these years.
We only have 7 minutes left, and Amy's hand has been up for a while.
Yeah.
So Amy,
Yeah, I think this will be pretty quick, but I just had a suggestion for the next meeting that in addition to what Andy had proposed about talking through each of the recommendations and which ones we had issues with, I think it would also be helpful to talk about priority. I think you said there's like over 100 recommendations, and right now it kind of reads a little bit like a laundry list of ideas. So if we could somehow think about how to sort them or prioritize in some way, I think that might help it be easier to read and easier to scan and quickly identify what the top priorities are. So that's just a suggestion for next time.
So Amy, it sounds like you're saying come prepared next time, and with an eye towards prioritization. Okay. Someone's trying to speak?
That may have been me who said, okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Laura. All right. So we got 5 minutes left. We're going to wrap up this part of the review, I think. So do we go with the recommendation that everybody's homework is to go through the recommendations, the ones that are problematic, make their comments, as Amy said, try to prioritize as you're commenting. And as Laura said, if you, it would be greatly appreciated that if you come up with a grid of recommendations and comments, if you could send them to Laura and I before the meeting, that would help us prepare. Does that sound right, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking instead of, but no, once we're going to meet, I don't need to see it before, I don't think.
I would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you can.
If you can, send them along. I'd be curious to see what they are and kind of know what we're going to talk about before the meeting. All right.
Is it possible to decide on a meeting night while we're here so that we don't have to do it by email?
Well, I thought it was all about trying to get a Zoom slot.
So I have the dates in front of me that are open in June.
Okay.
There's nothing left in May. Maybe if people could just say if they cannot go, if one of these work nights does not work for them. Tuesday, June 2nd. Thursday, June 4th. Monday, June 8th. All right, well, the other two dates are like at the end, the 22nd and 29th. So why don't we try for one of those three?
I can't do well, actually we'd be done. We wouldn't start until 7:30, right? I have another meeting that goes 4 to 6.
What night?
On Monday, the 8th, sorry.
Okay.
Monday, the 8th isn't great for me either, but either the Tuesday or Thursday is fine.
Okay, fine. All right. All right. I might vote for the Thursday, the 4th, then, because I usually do yoga on Tuesday nights. So I can miss that if I have to, but I'd rather not. So if the 4th works for everyone, let's try for the 4th.
That might not work for me. What happened to, how about the 3rd? What was the 3rd?
No, the 3rd is not an option.
Okay.
Oliver, thank you. Okay.
It's just a birthday, but who's going to be able to have a birthday? Not mine.
I actually
Mine.
have something on the 4th too, now that you say it. So maybe we'll do the 2nd. Maybe we'll do the 2nd. Okay.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Because I forgot that I have something on the 4th as well. So also a birthday.
7:30, is that what it is?
Well, that's what we usually do. So,
Yeah, fine.
okay. Tuesday, June 2nd, I'll post it tomorrow. And I will try to, is Vinny still on the call? I will try to post it. The draft is very big, so I cannot email it. So it's like, it's hard for me to post it, but I might be able to post the link to the Dropbox. That's where it is. So I will do that as soon as I can. Okay.
All right, Laura, can we talk about one more thing about the next meeting? Should we solicit agenda items right now or get an idea? Because I'd like to put on the agenda discussion around the Watertown Faces Climate Change letter. I think, Amy, you have an item that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I know there's been some email traffic about this, but I just wanted to talk about the pandemic and what we can do to support walking and biking in Watertown during this time. I've seen a lot of proposals from neighboring towns around things like shared streets and extending the sidewalks in certain locations, and making the pedestrian buttons automated so you don't have to touch it and things like that. So I'd be interested in having some discussion about opportunities for things that we can do, either through this group or maybe as a smaller committee if there's not time on the next call, if others are interested in talking about this.
All right, Amy, if you could drive that discussion as well, that would be great, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
And Andy?
Janet, yeah.
I want to talk about the ad hoc committee that the WFCC is putting together. People might be interested.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's a good one. Thanks, Janet. All right. Are we all set? Does anybody?
I wanted to there was one other thing on the agenda. It wasn't under the updates that I wanted to update people on, which is that Blue Bikes is moving right along. We are expecting it around July 1st to get 6 Blue Bike stations. We're very close to having a final contract and site of the station. So it's nice that something's happening.
All right. Any comments, anybody? Laura, thank you very much for putting this all together. It's a lot of work. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
It's wonderful to see everybody.
It is. And I have to say this went better than I was expecting. I thought this was going to be much more difficult. So everybody was very polite and prepared.
Technology is great when it works. All right. If everybody's, I guess that's it. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay. June.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Andy.
Everybody, stay healthy.
Thank you.